They thought I was just a tired old man with nothing left to fight for. Maybe I looked that way. 68 years old, bad knee, hearing aid in my left ear. My son had started calling me Pop in that tone. The one that means you don't understand how the world works anymore. My daughter-in-law stopped looking me in the eye sometime around Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I noticed. I just didn't say anything. That was my mistake, I think, staying quiet too long. But here's what they didn't know. What nobody knew, except me, and now, finally, I do too. My wife Rosalind drove to the same post office every Thursday morning for 31 years. Rain, snow, August heat that made the asphalt shimmer. Every Thursday. I used to joke about it when we were younger. "What do you mail every week, Rosie?" "Love letters," she'd laugh and say. Something like that, and I'd forget about it until the following week when she'd back the Buick out of the driveway again. Same time, same direction. I never followed her. I never asked seriously. I trusted her the way you trust the ground under your feet. You don't think about it, you just walk. She passed away 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. 9 weeks from diagnosis to the end. There was no time to prepare, no time to ask all the questions I'd been saving for later. That's the cruelest part of fast deaths. They steal the conversations you thought you had years left to have. After the funeral, I sat in our house in Columbus, Ohio, and I didn't know what to do with myself. 43 years of marriage, and suddenly I was eating cereal at 6 in the morning, standing over the kitchen sink because sitting at the table felt wrong without her across from me. The house felt wrong too, but it was my house, ours. We'd bought it in 1989, paid it off in 2011. I had the deed in a fireproof lockbox in the closet. I knew exactly what we owned and what we didn't. What I didn't know was everything else. My son Garrett is 41. He works in commercial real estate in Cincinnati, which means he thinks he understands property and money better than anyone else in any room. His wife. I'll call her what she is because I have no reason to be polite anymore. His wife Melissa had been eyeing our house for years. I'd catch her walking through the rooms during family visits, pausing in doorways, looking at ceilings. Rosalind noticed too. "She's measuring," my wife said to me once, quietly in the kitchen. "Don't let her measure." I didn't know what she meant then. I do now what she meant then. I do now. My daughter Courtney is 37. She lives 20 minutes away in Westville, and, to be honest, I always thought she was the reasonable one, the one who'd keep things decent. I was wrong about that too. 3 weeks after Rosalind's funeral, Garrett and Melissa drove up from Cincinnati. They didn't call first. They had a key we'd given them 1 year ago for emergencies, and they let themselves in on a Saturday morning while I was still in my robe. Melissa was carrying a notepad. I should have told them to leave right then. I didn't. I poured coffee. Garrett sat down at the kitchen table. Rosalind's chair, not even his father's chair, hers, and he said, "Pop, we need to talk about the practical stuff." Melissa set her notepad on the table and uncapped a pen. The practical stuff, it turned out, was everything. They wanted to know about the savings accounts, the investment accounts, the life insurance payout, whether I had a financial advisor, whether I'd thought about downsizing. That word, downsizing, Melissa said it the way you'd say obviously, like it was already settled, like my living in this house was a temporary situation that hadn't caught up with reality yet. Then she said, "A house this size is a lot to maintain alone. Have you thought about an independent living facility?" I was 68 years old. I had a bad knee. I was not dying. I said, "I'm fine here." Garrett said, "We're just thinking about what's best for you." But he was looking at the built-in bookshelves Rosalind had custom-ordered in 2003, the ones that covered the entire east wall of the living room. And Melissa was writing something in her notepad. Courtney came over that afternoon. I thought she'd come to check on me, her father, 3 weeks after his wife's funeral. She walked in, hugged me, a short hug, the kind where neither person really leans in, and then she said, "So Garrett told me you guys talked about the house." I said, "We didn't talk about the house." I said, "We didn't talk about the house." She said, "I just want to make sure everything's handled fairly." Fairly. That word sat in my chest like a stone. Over the next 2 months, the visits got more frequent and the conversations got less subtle. Garrett mentioned a colleague who specialized in estate transitions. Melissa brought over a brochure for a retirement community in Dublin. Nice pictures, a pool, a dining room that looked like a hotel restaurant. Courtney started asking about Mom's jewelry, Mom's china, the quilt that had been in Rosalind's family for 3 generations. I kept saying I wasn't ready to make decisions. They kept finding new ways to say the same thing. "The house is too big. You're alone. You should let us help." What they meant was, "Move out so we can divide this up." One evening in January, cold, the kind of Ohio cold that gets into your bones, I was going through Rosalind's closet, not to clear it out, just to be near her things. She had a wooden box on the top shelf, the kind you'd find at a craft fair, painted with small blue flowers. I'd seen it 100 times, never opened it. It was her box, private, the way some things in a long marriage are just private, and I'd always respected that. I don't know why I opened it that night. Maybe I just needed to feel close to her. Inside, a small brass key with a paper tag looped through it, a folded paper, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. My full name, Philip Warren Holt, written in her handwriting. My hands were shaking before I even unfolded the paper. The paper was a receipt from a place called Keystone Document Vault, a private document storage facility on Morse Road, here in Columbus. The account had been opened in 1994. Rosalind had been paying the annual fee, $48 a year since then. 30 years of Thursday mornings, not the post office. The vault. The envelope. I sat on the edge of the bed and held it for a long time before I opened it. Her handwriting was careful, unhurried, the way she wrote when she wanted to say something exactly right. "Philip, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you found the box, which means you were finally curious enough to look. I always thought you might need to. I need you to go to Keystone. The key opens box 1 on 14. What's inside explains the rest. I didn't tell you about this while I was alive, because I didn't want you to worry, but I also didn't want to leave you unprotected. Go, and then talk to Gerald Hutchins at Hutchins & More on Broad Street. He's been our attorney for 12 years. Yes, ours. I hired him without telling you. I'm sorry for the secret. I'm not sorry for what I did. I love you more than this letter can hold. Use what I left you. Stand up straight. Don't let them shrink you. I read it 4 times. Then I sat in the dark for a while, just breathing. The next morning, I drove to Morse Road. Keystone Document Vault is in a low brick building, unremarkable, the kind of place you drive past 1,000 times without looking at. The woman at the front desk was professional, checked my ID against the account records, walked me to a private room with a narrow metal box on a table, the key fit. Inside, a manila folder, thick, accordion pleated at the sides. I opened it, and I understood, finally, why Rosalind had gone out every Thursday for 31 years. She had been maintaining records. Meticulous, organized, dated records going back to 1993, property tax filings, insurance payments, maintenance receipts, the original mortgage documents with both our signatures, the deed, a copy of it, with a cover letter from a title company confirming clear ownership with right of survivorship, which meant the house passed directly to me upon her death. No probate, no contest. But that wasn't all. There was a trust document. Rosalind had established a revocable living trust in 2008 with Gerald Hutchins as the drafting attorney and a local CPA firm as co-trustee. The trust held our investment accounts, 3 of them, and a small rental property in Guyana I did not know we owned. She had purchased it in 2011 with savings she'd accumulated from her 30 years as a registered nurse. She'd been renting it out quietly through a property management company, depositing the income into the trust account. There were also records for a whole life insurance policy she'd taken out on herself, paid up with a death benefit I will not state here except to say it was not a small number. I am the sole beneficiary of the trust. I am the sole beneficiary of the policy. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. Everything had been quietly, methodically arranged by a woman who apparently had understood our children better than I had, and had decided, years before they showed their hands, to make sure they couldn't touch any of it. I sat in that small room for 45 minutes. Then I called Gerald Hutchins. He had been expecting my call. Rosalind had told him years ago that I would come eventually. He had a file on his desk with my name on it. "Your wife was one of the most prepared clients I've ever had," he said. "She didn't leave a single gap." We met in his office on Broad Street 2 days later. He walked me through everything: the trust structure, the right of survivorship on the house, the insurance policy, the Gahana rental and its current value, the investment accounts, which had been growing quietly for 16 years. I drove home a different man than the one who'd gotten into the car that morning. Now I had a decision to make. Garrett called me that weekend. He and Melissa wanted to come up the following Saturday to go through some of Mom's financial paperwork together. He said it casually, like it was just logistics, like we were coordinating a school pickup. I said, "Sure, come at 10. I spent that week talking to Gerald, getting everything straight, understanding exactly what I had and exactly what they couldn't touch." Saturday came. Garrett and Melissa arrived at 10:05. Courtney pulled in right behind them. Nobody had mentioned Courtney was coming. That told me something about how organized this visit was. We sat in the living room. I sat in my chair. Rosalind's chair was empty. I'd moved it slightly to the side so no one else would take it. Melissa had her notepad again. Garrett said, "So, Pop, we thought we'd start with the accounts." "Do you know what you have liquid right now?" I said. "I do." He seemed surprised I answered that directly. He'd expected me to say I didn't know, that I needed help figuring it out. That was the opening they needed, the helpless old man who needs his children to sort through things for him. That's when Melissa's notepad becomes a plan. I said, "I've been working with an attorney, Gerald Hutchins, Hutchins and Moore on Broad Street. He's been handling things for our family for 12 years. I met with him this week." Melissa stopped writing. Garrett said, "An attorney? For what?" I said, "Estate matters. Your mother was more organized than any of us knew." There was a silence, the kind that is weight. I said, "The house is mine outright. Right of survivorship, no probate. Your mother and I owned it jointly. It passed directly to me at her death. The deed is clear." Melissa said, "Well, we weren't suggesting—" I said, "Let me finish. I said it quietly, but I said it. Your mother established a trust in 2008. The investment accounts are held in the trust. I am the sole beneficiary. There is also a life insurance policy, also naming me. And there is a rental property in Gahana that your mother purchased in 2011. I didn't know about it until this week. She managed it quietly for 13 years. Courtney said, a rental property? Yes, and she never told you. She left me a letter and a key and 30 years of records in a vault on Morse Road. Nobody said anything." I looked at my son. I've been looking at him for 41 years, since the night he was born, and I held him in a hospital in Columbus, and thought I had never loved anything so completely. I looked at him now and tried to find that feeling. It was still there, underneath everything. But there was something else there too, something that felt like clarity. I said, "I know what you've been thinking. I know what Melissa's notepad is for." I know why Courtney is here today when she wasn't invited. Garrett said, Pop, that's not fair. I said, your mother protected this family's assets for 30 years without saying a word. She protected them from bad markets, from bad luck, and apparently from bad intentions. The least I can do is honor what she built. Melissa said very carefully, we just want to make sure you're taken care of. I said, I am taken care of. Your mother took care of me. That's what the last 30 years were. That's what every Thursday was. I stood up. I'm not moving to a retirement facility. I'm not selling this house. I'm not liquidating accounts or distributing assets or doing anything you came here today hoping I'd agree to. I have an attorney. I have a financial advisor that Gerald recommended. I am 68 years old with a bad knee and a hearing aid, and I am the most financially secure I have ever been in my life because the woman who loved me was smarter and more careful than any of us deserved. Courtney started crying. I don't know if it was guilt or disappointment or something genuinely human. I didn't ask. Garrett looked at the floor. I said, You're welcome to stay for lunch, but the conversation we've been having for the last 2 months is over. Melissa picked up her notepad and put it in her bag. They did not stay for lunch. I walked them to the door and watched Garrett's car back out of the driveway and disappear around the corner. Courtney's right behind it. Then I went back inside and stood in the living room for a while. Just stood there. The house was quiet. The built-in bookshelves were full of books Rosalind had read, and some she'd always meant to. The quilt from her grandmother was folded on the arm of the couch where it had always been. I thought about 31 years of Thursday mornings, 31 years of a woman getting in a car and driving to a brick building on Morse Road to maintain a folder that she hoped I would never need. She knew me well enough to know I might need it. She knew our children well enough to know I definitely would. I sat in my chair, not Rosalind's chair, my own, and I did something I hadn't done since the week she died. I cried. Not from grief, exactly. Or not only from grief. I cried because I had been loved by someone who thought 30 years ahead, who protected the people she loved, even from a distance she couldn't cross yet, who left me not just money and property, but the dignity to stand in my own living room and tell my own children that this was my house and I was not leaving. That's what she gave me. That's what was in box 114. I called Gerald the next day. We began the process of making everything formal, explicit, airtight. Any future claim on the trust assets would face a wall of documentation that Rosalind had spent 3 decades building. The Gargano property was appraised. The insurance policy was confirmed. The investment accounts were reviewed and consolidated with a fee-only financial advisor on the east side of Columbus. A woman Gerald recommended. No nonsense, the kind who explains things without condescending. I started eating breakfast at the kitchen table again. I put the wooden box back on the top shelf of the closet with the letter folded inside it. I kept the brass key on my keychain, right next to the house key. I don't know why exactly. It just felt right. A reminder of what was left me. A reminder of what she built. Garrett has called twice since that Saturday. The conversations have been short and careful. We haven't talked about money or the house or retirement communities. We've talked about the weather and his kids, my grandchildren, who I see on my own schedule now. I drive down to Cincinnati on the 3rd Sunday of the month, and we have lunch, and I am a grandfather, and he is my son, and Melissa brings out coffee, and everyone is polite. It's not what I wanted. I wanted my family intact, my wife alive. 31 years of Thursday mornings that were just ordinary errands, no locked boxes, no secrets, no notepad on my kitchen table. But Rosalind understood something I didn't. She understood that love isn't just warmth and closeness. Sometimes love is a brass key and a fireproof document and a letter that says stand up straight. I'm standing up straight. The house is mine. The life she built for us is mine. And every Thursday morning now, I drive to the library, Not for any particular reason, just because I want a reason to get in the car. And I think about her, what she was doing all those years, what she knew, what she left me. She was the fortress. I just didn't know it until I needed the walls. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any abstract way, just the plain practical kind. The kind where you trace a line backward from where you ended up and try to understand how you got there. Garrett and Melissa didn't become that way overnight. That kind of entitlement, walking into your father's house 3 weeks after your mother's funeral with a notepad already measuring, that takes years to build. It builds from small moments where someone wasn't told no, from family dinners where keeping the peace felt more important than telling the truth. I'm not saying that was all my fault, but I know I stayed quiet longer than I should have. I let certain things go unnamed because naming them felt like starting a fight. And I didn't want to fight. I wanted a family that got along. The cost of that, I learned, was that some people mistook my quiet for weakness. That's the first thing I'd tell anyone in a situation like mine. Your silence is not kindness. Sometimes it's just delayed damage. Rosalind understood that. She didn't say it out loud. Not to me, not to the kids, but everything she did said it plainly. She spent 31 years quietly building something because she'd already seen, long before I did, what certain people would do when they thought no one was watching. She didn't rage about it. She didn't confront anyone. She just built walls, carefully, one Thursday at a time. That's a different kind of strength than I ever knew how to practice. It's the strength of someone who thinks further ahead than the next conversation. I think about the intelligence required to do what she did, not intelligence in the test score sense. Rosalind never talked about being smart. She talked about being careful, about paying attention, about not assuming that love alone would protect the people you love. She understood that the world runs on documentation and law and clearly stated intentions, and she made sure her intentions were stated so clearly that no one could argue with them after she was gone. That's not cynicism. That's wisdom. There's a difference. What I had to find after she died was my own version of that. I'd spent 68 years being the kind of man who trusted that things would work out, that family would behave like family, that decency was self-enforcing. Standing in my living room that Saturday, looking at my son and his wife and my daughter, people I'd fed and driven to school and sat up with when they were sick, I had to find something in myself that wasn't grief, wasn't anger, wasn't just the desire to keep things smooth. What I found was Rosalind's letter. Stand up straight. Don't let them shrink you. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the money, not the trust, not the rental property in Gahana. Those are just facts. What matters is that she believed I had it in me to stand up, and she made sure that when the moment came, I had something solid to stand on. I don't know what Garrett and Melissa talk about when they drive home from Columbus. I don't know if Courtney has thought about what she was willing to do to her own father for a share of a house. Maybe they have. Maybe they haven't. That's their work to do, not mine. My work was to not disappear, to not let grief and age and a bad knee convince me that I had nothing left worth defending. Rosalind built a fortress. The least I could do was walk inside it and hold the door. I'm still holding it.